This is Concept E classes, and today we'll deal with the question and answers of chapter 12 in class 8 science, friction. So before we enter into the exercises, let's take a quick revision of what all we have studied in this chapter. First we saw what is the force of friction. It is a force which opposes the motion of an object. Then we saw what are the factors affecting friction. There were two factors. One was the nature of the surface, that is the irregularities between the surface, and the second one was the weight of the object on the surface. Then we saw friction a necessary evil, how friction is necessary to us as well as how friction is evil to us. Then we also studied about how we can increase and reduce friction. Then we saw the different types of friction, that is rolling friction, static friction and sliding friction, and finally we dealt about fluid friction as well. Now let's enter into the exercises. Exercises. Question number 1. Fill in the blanks. A. Friction opposes the dash between the surfaces in contact with each other. So friction is a force that opposes the motion of an object. B. Friction depends on the dash of the surfaces. We know that friction depends on two factors. One is the nature of the surfaces and the second one is the weight of the object on the surface. C. Friction produces dash. Friction produces heat. We know that if we try rubbing your palms together vigorously, we can feel heat between our palms. Similarly, when a matchstick is rubbed against a rough surface, it catches fire. So it is also a form of heat. Hence, we can say that friction produces heat. D. Sprinkling of powder on a carom board dash friction. Will it increase friction or reduce friction? It will reduce friction. E. Sliding friction is dash than static friction. Will it be more or less? It will be lesser than static friction. We have explained this in the first video of this chapter. So if you have any doubts, please refer the corresponding slides. Question number 2. 4 children were asked to arrange forces due to rolling, static and sliding friction in decreasing order. The arrangements are given below. So these are the arrangements, and we have to arrange the forces rolling, static and sliding friction in decreasing order. So static friction would have the largest frictional force as compared to sliding and rolling, because static friction is a force that keeps an object at rest, whereas sliding friction is a friction that appears when an object slides over another. Here the friction is less as compared to that of static. And in the case of rolling friction, it is easier to roll objects than sliding it. Hence, rolling friction would be less as compared to sliding friction. So the order would be static, sliding and rolling. Question number 3. Alida runs her toy car on a dry marble floor, wet marble floor, newspaper and a towel spread on the floor. The force of friction acting on the car on different surfaces in increasing order will be A. Wet marble floor, dry marble floor, newspaper and towel, dry marble floor, wet marble floor. C. Towel, newspaper, dry marble floor, wet marble floor. D. Wet marble floor, dry marble floor, towel, newspaper. So a girl called as Alida, she is running her toy car on a dry marble floor, wet marble floor, a newspaper and towel. And on these four surfaces, the toy experiences friction. So we have to arrange the frictional force on the different surfaces in increasing order. So which would have less friction would come first. So what will be the answer? Obviously the wet marble floor will come in the first, because we know that the irregularities, friction is caused by the irregularities on the surfaces, and if the surface is smooth, there would be less irregularities. So in the wet marble floor, the irregularities are less, hence the friction is less. Then comes dry marble floor. It will offer a little more friction. Newspaper, even though it's smooth, it gives much more friction than dry marble floor. And finally towel. In towel we can see that there are many irregularities, hence the frictional force would be largest inside the towel. Question number 4. Suppose your writing desk is tilted a little and a book kept on it starts sliding down. Now show the direction of the frictional force acting on it. So what will be the direction of the frictional force? It will always be opposite to the direction of the motion of the object. So here the object is book, and obviously the frictional force would be in the direction opposite to that of the direction of the book. And when the book slides down on the desk, why do it slides down? It is due to the force of gravity. the frictional force, it will act upwards because the motion of the book is downwards, the frictional force would be upwards. And hence the direction of the frictional force would be in the upward direction. Question number 5. You spill a bucket of soapy water on a marble floor accidentally, and would it make it easier or more difficult for you to walk on the floor? Why? Will it be difficult or easier to walk on the floor? It would be difficult. Let's see why. As we have studied that friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces. What happens? It is, if you try walking, it is the irregularities on the feet and that of the ground. It lock onto one another and it causes friction. Hence we are able to walk. So if you spill a bucket of soapy water on the floor, what happens? The surface becomes smooth. It is, the irregularities become less. Hence the friction also reduces. Thus it would be difficult for us to walk and we might even slip. Question number 6. Explain why sportsmen use shoes with spikes. So why do they use? So as to increase the friction between the ground and the shoe. We know that sportsmen, they move around, they run, they jump, and they require a lot of friction between the ground and that of the shoe. So if shoes have spikes, they will provide a better grip so that they can move easily. Question number 7. Iqbal has to push a lighter box and Seema has to push a similar heavier box on the same floor. Who will have to apply a larger force and why? So let's see who. As Iqbal pushes a lighter box, the frictional force would be less. Hence less force should be applied. We know that if less is the weight of the object on the surface, less would be the frictional force. If more is the weight of the object, more will be the frictional force. So when Seema pushes a heavier box, larger force have to be applied. As more weight of the object, more will be the frictional force between them. That is, we know that when a heavy object is placed on a surface, the interlocking between them, that is the floor and the ground, it becomes strong. Hence, what happens? The friction would be more. Hence, we have to apply a larger force in order to overcome the friction. Hence, Seema have to apply a larger force than Iqbal. Question number 8. Explain why sliding friction is less than static friction. Friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. So when we try to move an object, the irregularities on the two surfaces, that is, for example here the box and that of the ground, they interlock with each other to cause friction. But when one object slides on the another, what happened? The object doesn't get much time to interlock with the irregularities on the surface. Hence, less irregularities, what happens? The friction would also be less. Thus, we can say that sliding friction is less than that of static friction. Question number 9. Give examples to show that friction is both a friend and a foe. So let's see the examples which show that friction is a friend. Friction helps us in holding objects as well as picking objects. Friction helps us in writing. It helps us in walking, running, etc. It fixes a nail. It also affects the motion of an object. How? It stops the motion of an object. If there was no friction, we couldn't apply brakes or the moving object would always be moving if there was no friction. Friction also helps us in lighting a matchstick. Now let's see how friction acts as a foe. Friction, it wears out materials like screws, ball bearings, shoes, tires, etc. Friction, it also produces heat in certain machines which might cause damage, and because of the heat a lot of energy is also wasted, and friction, it also slows down the motion of an object. Question number 10. Explain why objects moving in fluids must have special shapes. Let's see why. We know fluids. Fluids are the common name for both gases and liquids, and they exert force of friction when objects move through them. For example, in this case of bungee jumping, we can see that there is a resistance or a friction from the air, which reduces the speed. Similarly, while swimming, we can also experience a resistance from water. Hence, we can say that the fluids, they exert a force of friction when objects move through them. And when these objects move through them, they have to overcome the friction acting on them. And in this process, they lose a lot of energy. So in order to minimize the friction, the objects are given special shapes like that of birds and fishes. That is why if you observe this aeroplane, you can see that it's similar to that of the birds. It has wings and it's pointed in the front. This is mainly in order to reduce friction. So all vehicles which move through fluids are designed to have special shapes so as to reduce the fluid friction so that they could move easily through fluids. So if you have any doubt concerning fluid friction, just refer the first video of this chapter. So that's all for the question and answers of chapter 12 friction. Tune in soon for the next session. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe if you find the contents useful. Thank you so much. May God bless you all. Take care and bye-bye.